Fundamentally, the Skoda Kushaq has not really changed as a car. If you want something that gives you classy, understated European styling, this is still it. If you want a car that gives you great driving manners, great handling manners, great riding manners, this car is still it. If you want a car that gives you a cabin that is very spacious and comfortable for 4 adults and gives you a boot that may not look all that large from the outside but is actually one of the most practical and sensibly laid out in the entire segment, this car is still it. And what this car also is enthusiast friendly to drive. You still have the same drive options with the 1.5 litre 4-cylinder turbo TSI, and you have the mainstay, the 1 litre TSI 3-cylinder option that has, for all intents and purposes, the entry level option with the Kushaq, but happens to be more engine than most people would ever need. But the one big change is this, the new 8-speed torque converter automatic transmission. So how does that change things? So is the difference with this new 8-speed torque converter automatic transmission really night and day? Honestly, no. It's 2 additional ratios. So the question becomes, where exactly are you seeing the benefit of it? And rather importantly, why did Skoda bother with this change in the first place? Well, from their perspective, I would have to assume that it has to do something with emissions. A lot of manufacturers do this where they give you like a lot more ratios to play around with, because on testing cycles, it does prove to make the car a lot more efficient. That can also translate to better real-world fuel efficiency, but that's something that we aren't in the position to judge or confirm, at least at this point. So where is it that you're actually seeing the benefit of this new gearbox? Is it at the top end on the highway because you have a taller last ratio? Well, not really, because when you're sitting in 8th gear at 100 kilometers per hour, the car is sitting at roughly the same revs as it did in the 6-speed torque converter automatic. So around 2000 RPM in 8th gear at 100 kilometers per hour. And 8th gear is something you really only engage once you've crossed 80 kilometers per hour. So not really a major difference or benefit on that front, but then again, it's not like you needed that incremental difference, because the 1 litre TSI with that old transmission was completely happy and relaxed even when you were driving it on the highway or going through ghat section or pushing the car at any given driving scenario. So is it at the bottom end then? Well, there are some marginal differences there. When you get off the line, you'll find that the transmission's response is a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more forgiving, and notably smoother as well. It's something that you're going to appreciate, especially if you're driving a lot more in the city. But importantly, even if you're a chauffeur-driven owner, this car does have a lot more for the backseat owner this time around. You're going to find that the experience is a lot smoother while the car goes through the gears. In fact, I should actually correct myself there. It's not a lot smoother, but there is an incremental and notable difference that you're going to observe as a benefit with this new transmission. Otherwise, the behavior is just amplifying the pros that you had with this engine to begin with. Yes, the 1 litre TSI is the entry-level engine, but at no point, whether you're driving in the city, on the highway, making high-speed overtakes, driving alone, driving with a full load, going through inclined sections, this engine is just so versatile that in terms of usability and excitement, it proves to be just a brilliant balance. It also gets paddle shifters. It lets you get pretty aggressive with your downshifts. Not to mention, for a torque converter, it's surprisingly responsive. In both regards of smoothness as well as responsiveness, this 8-speed torque converter is doing a better job of getting closer in terms of behavior to the 7-speed DSG that you get in the 1.5. In many ways, this car has now become like your drunk friend from college, but just a little bit more responsible now. But that doesn't mean that he's not capable of partying really hard when you want him to. So then the question does come up. Is it now a case where you don't need the 1.5 TSI at all? Not really. There is a certain use case for that particular engine, and it's for a select few niche buyers, I'd say. Because if you want that added level of refinement, definitely you're going to experience that with that 1.5. Because here, you still have that little bit of a 3-cylinder gargle that's constantly making you aware of what engine configuration you're running. Not something that's an annoyance, not something that even plays up when it comes to vibrations, but it is audible in any given scenario. Something you'll have to cover up by maybe bumping up the music that you're listening to, but certainly not unrefined in that regard. But if you do want that added level of spit and polish, you will get that with the 1.5. If you want to have a car that's going to be a lot more enjoyable with overtakes and pushing it hard on the highway, definitely that engine is going to have a USP on that regard as well. But ultimately, choosing the 1.5 over the 1 liter, it's still a question of wanting that upgrade and not really needing it. It's for a select few people, but I feel like the gap between the 1 and the 1.5, at least with the automatics, is a lot narrower. As for the ride and handling, it is more or less the same affair. It is a car that inspires a great deal of confidence and it just edges you on a little bit to push a little bit harder, to have a little bit more fun, and it is quite an engaging experience from behind the wheel. Similarly, the ride, it stays quite similar in most regards, wherein you do have a little bit of initial stiffness that you're going to pick up on bumpy roads or sharper potholes, but otherwise the road manners are really good. Even if you're driving over a very bumpy concrete road like this one at 95-100 kilometers per hour and you are running a full passenger load as well, yes, you can pick up on slight imperfections on the road in terms of how the surfacing is done, but at the same time the car doesn't feel bouncy on the recovery. And even if you come across certain odd expansion joints like the one I just went through right now, the recovery is so quick that long distance journeys are never going to be taxing. The one point where there could be room for improvement is when you're driving at really low city speeds, where something like a Creta would give you a bit more bump absorption when it comes to sharper potholes or bumps. If you're driving primarily in the city, that is one place where you're going to feel an added level of stiffness that you may have wanted to be rounded off a bit better. But otherwise, overall, as a ride and handling package, the Kushaq was and still is quite impressive. The experience inside the cabin has not changed by much. So the Kushaq is still a car that's quite friendly if you are on the heftier side, the taller side, or like me, on both sides, wherein you have a driver's seat that gives you a great deal of, or rather a great range of travel adjustment. So with the seat set to my position, I can still sit quite comfortably. There's adequate room in the footwell. I'm not feeling restricted in here with my legs, even though I can rest my left leg on the center console and the right on the door pad over here. So it is quite comfortable, and you can also stretch out, meaning this is some place that even if you are larger in size, you can spend extended hours in this saddle. Yes, somebody like me would find that the seat could have been a little bit larger, but honestly, for most people, 99.99% of people, these seats are also going to feel plenty comfortable and supportive as well, because the lateral bolstering is not too restrictive either. One thing that I have to mention though is that with the addition of this panoramic sunroof, it does feel like the headroom has reduced. So if you're up to about 6'1", 6 feet tall, that's not really going to be an issue. But if you're going to be that height and also wearing a turban, at that point you will find that the roofliner is brushing up against your head ever so slightly, even if you do have the driver's seat set to its lowest adjustment position.
A small clarification here. The perceived reduction in headroom isn't actually down to the sunroof, single pane or panoramic. It is, however, down to the powered seat mechanism, which limits how low the front seats can go.
Even the dashboard's design stays largely the same, and the experience, even in terms of quality, not really a major difference on that front. One thing that you will pick out on is whether you get the Prestige variant like I'm in right now, or if you get the Monte Carlo, which will swap the super bright red interior for something that's a little bit more subtle burgundy, that you have this new panel in between that does look a little bit nicer. But you also will note that there's one too many textures in this cabin. Typically something that I would have expected in like a Mahindra, but in the Skoda it's like, okay, there's one texture here, one on the door pad top, one over here, one over here, one over here. It's making like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different changes by the time you move from the dash top to the bottom. Not something that's an issue, but it does seem a little bit busy. And I'd say that certain finishes, not this part right here, but on the dash top or on the door pad top, the kind of graining or texturing that they've done with the plastic, it does make it feel like it's a little bit more scratchy than it ought to be. It's not a question of the plastic quality itself, but it's what finish it has, which doesn't feel all that nice. But otherwise, fitment quality and interior quality overall is premium, well built, but not exceptional. Now on to the features list, but before I get into the details of what you get in this top-end variant, what has to be mentioned is the sheer amount of stuff that you get as standard with the Kushaq. Because one question that people were asking was, if I do have a Kayak available to me and the more popular engine option with the Kushaq is anyway going to be the 1-liter TSI, why would I spend that additional money for something like a Kushaq? But the fact of the matter is, even if you do opt for a top-end variant of the Kayak and you want to make that switch to a lower variant of the Kushaq to get that additional boot space, to get that additional rear seat space, you'll find that the lower variants, the base or even the one above base, they're quite loaded. And alloy wheels, a single-pane sunroof, automatic climate control, auto-dimming IRVM, rain-sensing wipers, rear washer, defogger, all of these features come in as standard, as does touchscreen infotainment. So you won't find the need to really move to the higher variants for you to feel like you've got a car that's, well equipped. But if you do make that push to get the fully loaded or more heavily loaded versions of the Kushaq, there are a few enhancements here, but the overall package still stays the same in terms of giving you features that you'd like and need, but not really getting into the gimmicky space per se. For example, both the front seats are powered and they are ventilated. You have this new panoramic sunroof that's available in the higher variants. There's this new touchscreen infotainment system. The layout and the interface is quite similar to what we'd seen before. And I would say that it's not all that intuitive. A lot of times it does feel like you have to go into one menu option too many to try and figure out things. So you're going to have to put in a little bit of time to get used to the basic user interface of this. But touch response, the touch feel, all that is completely on point. Simultaneously, you also get this new digital instrument cluster with multiple views. You can have it completely clean. You can have it with the typical analog style display, something that I prefer personally. And while you don't get to see Google Maps or Apple Maps navigation displayed here directly, something that you do have in certain other cars, both cheaper as well as more expensive, you do have the option of seeing turn-by-turn navigation inputs in here. But one thing that they seriously need to put in work for, because they have enhanced the features list, is give us a rear camera. If you're not going to give us a surround view camera, give us a rear camera with better quality. This kind of resolution is not impressive in the daylight, which means it's not going to be much better in the night either, is it? And there are, of course, some smaller but significant touches, like the fact that you have dual color ambient lighting, you have a wireless phone charger, there's these cup holders in between with a ribbed finish at the bottom to make it easier to open your cans, plus the door pockets also plenty accommodating. But besides all of these small touches, what Skoda has done is put a little bit more focus on who we didn't think the Kushaq's customer really was, the backseat owner. Now, backseat owners will get amenities like rear AC vents, Type-C chargers, as well as this rear armrest. But one interesting addition is rear seat massaging. It's the last thing I would have expected in a car like the Kushaq. And thankfully, this is not a gimmick. Even if you are somebody with the cherbosity that I come with, you can still feel the massage seats really doing their work in the back. Unfortunately, you don't have a light to tell you when the setting is on or off, nor are there any different modes to the massaging itself. And yes, it will switch off after a time like most massage seat setups do, but it's definitely a nice feature to have, especially if you're going to spend extended hours in your office commutes while your driver or your partner is taking you around. At the same time, I do have to mention that this feature, it is a bit noisy. Like, even if you have a little bit of music playing, there's a little bit of a hum from that electric motor coming about, which can get a little bit annoying, or maybe you'll get used to it over time. Otherwise, this backseat experience is like it was before. No real change in dimensions, so it is a cabin best suited to 4 occupants, not 5. The middle occupant is not going to be all that comfortable because the width is not that accommodating. I am currently seated behind somebody who is 5'6", as somebody who is 6'5", and my knees are just about touching the front seat. Here's a look at what the cabin space is for somebody of a more representative size for the Indian audience. This is the cabin space for somebody who is 5'8" behind his own driving position. This is the cabin space for somebody who is 5'8" sitting behind somebody who is 5'11". And this is the cabin space for somebody who is 5'8" behind somebody who is 6'5". I'm also happy to note that the overall seat comfort is a strong point in the Kushaq. The backrest is large enough and broad enough that somebody of a larger size will also feel comfortable in here. The seat cushioning is on point because it's neither too soft nor too stiff, so it is going to age well, which is Not something I'm sure I can say about the light beige interior that you now get in the Kushaq, something that can end up getting spoiled or soiled, especially if you have kids in the household. But overall, the experience definitely feels a lot more uplifting. Now, the panoramic sunroof itself doesn't extend all the way back, which means your view as a rear passenger is sort of forward and not upward of this particular sunroof. But thankfully, if you are on the taller side, tall passengers at the back are not going to feel uncomfortable because the headroom is notably better than it is up front because there's nothing occupying the space up top over here. I think just put in a sunshade at the back and you're good to go. The boot space. Now, when you look at the boot at a glance, it may seem like there's not a lot of space to play around with. But the fact of the matter is, even though it doesn't look like it, this is easily one of the most accommodating boots that you get in the entire segment. You want to get a full-size suitcase, a medium-size suitcase, a trolley bag, and some backpacks along with that. This car has the depth in its boot to fit everything together, even if you do have the parcel tray in place. I should mention that the on-paper number for the boot space has gone up, but that's just a difference in how Skoda is measuring the boot space. Remember, the Kushaq actually on paper has a bigger boot than the Kushaq had on paper earlier because they were measuring it all the way up to the roof, which explains the difference of about 106 liters on paper with the updated Kushaq. But whichever way you spin it, this is easily one of the best and most accommodating boots in the segment, and you don't have to sacrifice a spare tire either. Facelifts are a sport of tricky chemistry when it comes to car design, especially on the exterior, because the Skoda Kushaq was always a bit of good, understated and sort of aging well design that you always had, as you expect from any European car. But thankfully, they have retained that and not gone overboard with the changes when it comes to this updated Kushaq. What they have done is made it a little bit more remarkable with the kind of changes that you have with this updated front grille, the new headlight design, along with the headlight internals, specifically with the LED DRLs that do make it easier to tell this Kushaq apart as the new one. Not to mention the new color options that you have, like this Shimla green, tastefully named and looks tasteful as well. On the side profile, the changes are harder to tell, especially if you don't opt for one of the newer colors. What you do get is a wide variety of different wheel designs as well as wheel sizes. Remember, this thing gets alloy wheels as standard right from the base variant. What it does retain as both a pro and a con is the original silhouette and design of the car itself. The pro being that because you have this squared off stance, it does look nice and posh, it does look contemporary and stylish at the same time. But the problem remains that a lot of people associate this as a car that's slightly smaller than its segment contemporary. So if you were to place this next to a Seltos, a Creta, Grand Vitara, or even a Duster for that matter, it does look like it is a size smaller in comparison, and that's frankly because of the length. It is shorter. At the rear, what I appreciate is two things. One, it's a car that's relatively rare because I like it in equal measure whether I look at the front end or the rear end design. And importantly, it's a design that speaks to itself. It does feel like both the front and rear end belong to the same car, which isn't always the case. Something like a Seltos, for example, the front end and the rear end, they feel like a little bit too distinct. But with the Kushaq, what they've maintained is that element of, well, elegance and European subtlety. You do have this connected light finish at the rear, but it's not a connected LED light bar. You have these Morse code-like elements, including for the reversing light, sequential turn indicators at the rear, and you also have this lit-up Skoda logo at the rear, making it look distinctive, but making sure that this car, even with its facelift, doesn't become shouty. The updates to this car don't necessarily give you drastic new reasons to consider buying a Skoda Kushaq. If you were the slightly niche buyer who was looking to buy one of these in the first place and were on the fence about it, the car now gives you more reasons to just jump the fence and bring one home. It remains one of those designs that's quite timeless and will age well, and simultaneously doing a better job of turning heads while doing that. It's also one of the better driving, riding and handling packages in the segment, and backs it up with two engine and transmission options that are plenty enthusiast friendly while also being adequately easy to use on a daily basis. The cabin space is good as ever, at least for 4 people it's plenty comfortable. The boot space may not look like it, but it's actually one of the better options in the entire segment. And the build quality, while being solid, is backed up by a safety package that's plenty rock solid in itself. So there you have it. The Skoda Kushaq, just better.